Welcome to Good Burger Reviews. My name is John and I'm here to do a brand new 2025 movie review. And that movie is Keeper.
Let's go back. Can we just do that? When we didn't know. We didn't know any of this.
This movie was released in November of 2025. It is directed by Ozgood Perkins. It is released by Neon. It is starring Tatiana Maslany and Rossif Sutherland. Terrifying visions plague a free-spirited artist when she travels to a secluded cabin with the doctor she's been dating for 1 year. And like many of Ozgood Perkins' movies, this one has left me with a whirlwind of emotions. So we're going to get into the good, the bad, the ugly, all that jazz, and break this movie down in the front end. We're going to do it in as spoiler-free way as possible. And then I will give a spoiler warning for when I get into the spoilers, because I do want to talk about some of the plot details of this movie. And then we'll go into the rating. So the good. The first thing that stands out to me in the good or the positives is Tatiana Maslany. She stars as the girl who's going off to this cabin with her boyfriend that she's been dating for a year, and the majority of this film really falls on her, because as she stays at this cabin, things start to unravel. Things aren't what they seem. Mysterious things start happening, and she's got to battle and figure out whatever it is that's possessing this place and keeping her there. And I would say that since she's got a lot of solo time in this role, she has to express a wide range of emotions, including anger, fear, confusion, even some comical moments. Another thing that I'll leave in the positives is the overall setting. Obviously, it's very secluded away in a cabin. There's lots of bumps, traditional scares, bumps in the night, creepers, crawlers, sounds, strange people showing up. It has all that. And also, Ozgood Perkins, with that, is really good with cinematography, the imagery, the sounds, the shooting, the camera work. Just everything is so deliberate in this film, and it really shines for the majority of it. Now, there is a part of it that I will put in the mix or negatives, and we'll get into that. Also in the positives, I would say, is the creatures or the things that are in this, just the special effects around them, the design of what is behind all of what's going on is really neat. I found it disturbing to look at, but like also somewhat different in some ways. And there was also inspirations from movies of the past that I just said, ooh, that just kind of reminded me of like a scene from Elm Street Dream Warriors. And another thing where it maybe reminded me of like a Stephen King film. Overall, I would say I like Rossif Sutherland as well as the boyfriend, the doctor boyfriend, who Tatiana Maslany's been dating. And he gives a very cryptic, creepy, but yet at the same time a little bit stoic. It's on the fence where it's going with him, but his performance is really well. And what I really like about him is he gives this like vibe of a guy that was like back in the movies that were made in like the late 60s, early 70s, that just that very Clint Eastwood type of, Paul Newman type of vibe in a character, because most of the guys today, even middle-aged guys on screen, they tend to have like this younger look or middle-aged or like a glossy look to them. And this guy has the old school rugged look to him, which I appreciated in a character in a modern movie. I also liked how this movie, it was totally giving me like a 1970s vibe as well. Until I realized there was a part where she had a cell phone, and then there's a part where it says like it's 2022. But it really was giving me a past feel, and as the movie unravels, you kind of figure out why. But overall, this is a very original story, mostly. I mean, it had like a lot of originality to it. So this will bring me to what I'm mixed on. And I think, as I was saying, part of what Osgood Perkins and the cinematography that's in this movie, there's a lot of imagery and a lot of... I think most of the camera work was done really good, but it seemed like some of the shots where some of the tactics that were used were just like, kind of like when you get a camera for the first time and you want to test out all the things it can do, all the little tricks, like, you know, the changing of the background or the blurring of the background, just little things like that. It seems like many of these shots, or many of these like even transitionary scenes where, you know, for example, there's this one scene where she's in a bathtub and then it transfers over to a shot of a river, but the water is glowing over, like glossing over her, and it almost looks like she's in the river. I mean, it's a pretty neat effect, but I'm like, you know, that's just kind of like party tricks. Also, with some of the shots, there's a lot of times where the camera's zooming in, or I'm looking at the background waiting for something ominous to happen or weird to pop up, and sometimes just nothing ever comes. It's just a long extended shot of some, like, again, I think of the bathtub scene where she's just sitting there and there's a shot in the background where you can see like the woods, and I'm just waiting for someone to creep up or crawl up in there. Now, things do happen. I'll get into that into the spoiler section, but it just left me with a mixed emotion with how that part was going down. And this brings me to the negative. So the big negative for me is there's just, the story overall isn't very clear. There's lots of ambiguity, and I'm the type of guy who just, you know, I like movies that are good burgers. You know, you kind of know what you're getting. You order a good burger and you kind of expect to just get the basic tomato, lettuce, ketchup, onion, cheese. And when you get a movie like that where you're kind of, it's like a popcorn movie. It's very entertaining. And this is the opposite. This is, you know, sometimes if you're the type of person who wants to go to a movie to just turn your brain off and watch some good horror, some good action, or some even comedy, this is not that type of movie. This is the type of movie, like, at the end where if there's a test you feel like you're gonna have to study.
When I find you. Pop quiz, hotshot.
You know, your brain goes into overload on trying to figure out what the hell is even happening in half of these scenes. What is some of the metaphors? What is some of the symbolism? And you spend the majority of the movie thinking, okay, so it's gonna be a slow burn, so it's gonna be mysterious, it's gonna have lots of metaphors, allegories, all that. Will it pay off in the end with a satisfactory conclusion so that you're like, okay, that was worth all that, you know, thought process to get through this movie? One thing that's going to be in the negatives is there's dream sequences in here. And I've mentioned this in many of my other reviews. Certain movies where the dream sequences are crucial to the film, i.e. A Nightmare on Elm Street. I was thinking even a little bit of Black Phone 2 this year where it was kind of okay, and Weapons had it and I was fine with it. But like, why put dream sequences in just to have a jump scare or just some sort of spook? You know, and was these dream sequences in this movie really relevant to pushing the plot forward? And I kind of felt like, nah, they could have done without it. And sadly, it just never wraps up a solid ending. It just, and I'll get more into this into the spoiler sections, but like, it just, you walk out thinking, what the heck happened? Like, what really happened to Tatiana Maslany's character? What happened? What caused all of this? Now, there is a scene where there is an exposition dump, and you do get some clarity in the end of the second act going into the third act. But it still wasn't enough, especially with the final scene of how it completely just finishes. And it's typical for Osgood Perkins. And I will say, you know, even though that overall in the negatives, Osgood Perkins as a director does leave me mixed. When I think about my experiences in the movies that he's released in the last year and a half, and he's had 2 other ones out, I think of Longlegs, which was my most anticipated movie of 2024, which left me highly disappointed because it really wasn't what I was expecting. Now, did I hate Longlegs? No. I just got disappointed because there was so much hype, so much build up, and it didn't live up to the hype that it created. And then he did, in the beginning of this year, The Monkey, and it was, The Monkey I wasn't super hyped on, but like, The Monkey also left me disappointed because it kind of was like this Final Destination meets a Stephen King mix-up. And it's just, I think what it comes down to it with Osgood Perkins for me is like, I never seem to be on board with the main characters. I did not like the twin brothers in The Monkey. And the main girl in Longlegs, Harker, she was okay. But, I had trouble buying into her because she was so awkward. And here, actually, in Keeper, I felt like Tatiana Maslany, her character is the best of all these. I actually was really liking her for the majority of the movie. And I think maybe I was liking the actress and the performance, because sometimes the character does make some really odd decisions, and I felt like she was being really smart for a long time throughout the movie until she wasn't. Until she did things and I thought, damn, don't get dumb like The Strangers Chapter 2. Now, it doesn't come anywhere near Strangers, by the way. This movie is very high quality. Very high quality with everything the way it's put together. I think for me, it just comes down to taste and, what I like about it and what I don't like about it. So with all that being said, I'm dying to get into the spoilers, so I'm going to give my spoiler warning here. So if you haven't seen the movie, I suggest skipping to the end if you want to see the rating. And I'll put a timestamp in. But if you have seen the movie or you don't care about spoilers, then definitely watch this, because I'm going to try and explain what I think this movie was about, what the ending was about, and what really happened in Keeper. This movie starts off where Liz and her boyfriend Malcolm, Liz is played by Tatiana Maslany, and Malcolm is played by Rossif Sutherland. They are in this cabin, and it seems like they have been dating a while. I guess it's close to their year anniversary, and they're going on like a getaway trip. And it looks like they're set to have this romantic weekend, but then Malcolm says like that his cousin owns the house next door and he's weird and like a family outcast or whatever, like the bad sheep in the family, and he might possibly be around, but he didn't see his car, so he wasn't there at the moment. But then lo and behold, the cousin Darren shows up and he brings a girl in with him, and Darren is highly annoying. Just one of those egotistical kind of pain in the neck guys. And then you have his girlfriend, who's beautiful, but she doesn't speak a lick of English. And even though she does speak English, but he says, oh, she doesn't speak any English. No speaky, he says. But she didn't look Spanish. She looked more like Russian or German. Now, the whole weird thing that's going on in this movie, like, one thing is there's this cake that was given by, I guess, a caretaker. And the cake doesn't look all that appetizing. At least the box doesn't look that appetizing. And after Darren and the girl leave, and the girl says, the girl that didn't speak English says in perfect English, the cake tastes like shit. Which was interesting, and I thought, and it's a chocolate cake, and I'm like, oh God, I hope we're not going in a certain direction. Then it goes to a scene where Liz and Malcolm are going to have some foreplay. It looks like they're going straight for the bedroom, but like Malcolm puts the brakes on everything and says, oh, let's get some cake. Now, this was extremely irritating for me because I am one who has struggled over the years with eating, and I always hate it when people are trying to pressure me to eat food all the time, and I deal with it up until this current day where I'm always I call them pushers, these people who just love to push food on you. And this guy is pushing this cake on Liz, and she's like, oh, I don't want a piece of cake. First of all, she wasn't into the cake, she was into him, and now he's pushing this cake on her. She's not in the mood for cake. And then what gets me the most about this whole scene is he pushes a piece of cake on her. She finally caves in after saying she doesn't even like chocolate cake. Eats 2 bites of the cake, and then he doesn't eat any cake. And I thought, what the heck? You know, it's bad enough that you push the food, but now you're not going to even eat it. You just had her eat it. What's the point?
You tried this cake? This is a beauty.
That is nice. Would you Gonzo?
Hey, go easy on the buffet, fellas. I just want... who cut the cake?
I guess this is setting the stage with where these characters are kind of going and what the dynamic between the two of them are. And I'm thinking, what the heck does this cake have to do with what's going on in the movie? Now, the other thing that was interesting was the cousin makes this comment right before he leaves and says, oh, this girl, she's real nice, you know, referring to Liz, she's a real keeper. And I'm thinking, that little comment's going to come back later. Obviously, he's referencing the title of the movie. Things are starting to get weird. And I thought, what was in the cake? Was there Molly in the cake, or was there something that's going to knock her out? Like, what's going to happen? You know, is this going to become like a kidnapping situation? You know, because it wasn't, you know, the boyfriend seemed okay. I mean, he was a little cryptic and weird, but like, there was a nice side to him as well. I mean, he was a doctor. He seemed pretty preppy. For as rugged as he looked, he also seemed pretty preppy as well. Now, once she's had the cake, that's where the dream sequences that I mentioned earlier started happening. And, you know, she's starting, and there's, honestly, I don't even know if it was dream sequences or hallucinations, because it's like, all of a sudden, you know, she's not realizing everything that's going on. The house seems to be creeping up on her with mysterious things, i.e. when I think of the bathtub scene, there was this part in where I'm waiting for something to pop up in the background, but then all you see is like a little fog show up in the window and a little heart gets drawn. Which, you know, I thought that was going to tie into the movie at the end, and I felt like it really did. Now, despite the fact that I was really enjoying Tatiana Maslavny's performance as Liz, I was enjoying her as a character, now that she's had the cake and now that we're getting into like day 2, she starts making decisions that I thought were dumb, or tolerating a lot of stupid behavior on Malcolm's part. i.e., he gets a phone call and all of a sudden it's like he's got to go, he's got a patient that's near death, coming out of a coma, blah, blah, blah. And it just sounds like a bunch of made up stories. Even the name of the patient sound like made up. And I was like, and then she's got her girlfriend calling her saying, oh, you know, you're out there, he left you alone in the house because he leaves. And he's like, oh, he's probably got a wife and kids somewhere, and he's going to check on them and leaving you in the cabin, you know. He's keeping, and then the title gets referenced again. You know, he's got you kept in there. And she gets mad and hangs up on her. And it's like, okay, now we're starting to get somewhere a little bit with the title and how it's titling, you know, coming all together. But it's like, really, why did she let him leave? Why didn't maybe she just go with him into the city and maybe hang out nearby? I mean, obviously she's not going to go in a hospital and be near a patient, but, you know, why stay all the way out in the woods with the strange cousin just next door? Not to mention that the girlfriend was showing up in some of the dreams, and the girlfriend of the cousin, the girl that didn't speak English, but, you know, did speak English. You know, she's having visions of her. There's some, and this is where some of the really camera tricks are coming in, where like she has this vision of her, she's up close, and she's far away, then she's big, and there's like a smaller version of her. You know, I mean, it was a neat little trick, but I didn't understand what was the point of having that scene, except for to be spooky and ominous. And then the other big dumb decision that Liz makes, so there's a knock on the door, and I'm thinking, oh, especially if it's that cousin, don't open the door. Now cousin's at the door, he's knocking and ringing the doorbell all aggressive like he did the night before, and he's insisting on coming in, and she's resisting at first. I said, good for you, don't let him in. But then he makes this comment like, oh, I'm family, and I thought, so what? You don't know him from anybody. He's already weird and wacky as it was, don't let him in. And she lets him in. And the minute she lets him in, she's like instantly regretting it, because like he's already acting strange. Like, oh, let's open a bottle of wine, and she's like, well, where's your little girlfriend that was here from earlier? He doesn't really answer that. So she decides that she's going to go into the bathroom and maybe call for help. But she had left her phone in the basement, and she had locked herself in the bathroom, and this guy's wandering around the house, and I thought, oh, is she gonna go in there and just stall for a few minutes? No, she never comes out. And then he disappears in the house and something happens to him. And I think whatever it is that's going on in this movie gets him. Meanwhile, Liz is reaching out to Malcolm on the phone. He's not answering. It's going straight to voicemail. She's leaving messages like, hey, I'm not feeling comfortable here. You need to come back, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, Malcolm does come back. And when he comes back, it was odd that he was startled by the fact that Liz was still there. And he was like, jumped at her even being there. And she's spooked. And she's like complaining to him like, oh, you know, why are you leaving me here? I really am not comfortable with this place. I want to get out. You know, your cousin came. I feel like there's people in the house. She also had a vision of a lady with a bag on her head. She's like, you need to check the house. You know, there's people in this house. You need to go check. So he goes and investigates the house, and then he comes back, and it's like, when he comes back, and this was another thing I thought was so weird and dumb. He comes back and he goes, boo, and he scares her. I'm like, well, why would you do that? She's already upset. She already wants to leave. You're going to try and convince her to stay. Why would you try to make her more nervous? At this point, I thought, this is the third dumb thing that she's about to do. Now you're asking, I want to go. This guy, if he was your boyfriend, if he was your, you know, your mate, your lover, you know, a true friend, whatever, if it's time to go and you want to go, then let's go. But he's like, I can't let you leave. Now he's definitely keeping her. And it gets odd. And I'm wondering, is it because of everything she's ate? Has she has something in her system? Have these ghosts that have been popping in and out, these little demons or whatever they are, and we'll get into what they are, are they controlling her somehow? Because she just doesn't seem to be that aggressive after that point. Like, she gets upset, like, oh, I guess I'm just stuck here. He's a big old male and I'm little old me. And I'm like, ooh, that's not good. But, you know, he ends up trying to keep her there, and then she finds this picture of him where he's with a woman and two small kids, and it's a very aged picture, and I thought, man, that picture's old, like really old. Now, this is where we get a big exposition dump. So since he's going to keep her, he's clearly, you know, now the antagonist, part of the what's going down in this movie, and it starts to get explained. So this dates back almost 200 years, where him and his cousin in the early 1800s come across this like lady who's pregnant on their property, and they shoot her. And somehow she ends up in their property or in their barn or whatever, and she gives birth. But what she gives birth to it's not 100% clear, but it's clearly whatever it is whatever is stalking her in the movie. And this witch is giving these two guys life. Like, they are still middle-aged, and it's 200 years later, and they are getting women and bringing them to her, and like basically feeding them to her so that she can have whatever she wants them in her, but like they're also getting like eternity at the same time. Now, what I thought was weird was in the 200 year ago flashback, the two guys are much younger, so they aged a little bit. It seemed like they aged to their mid 40s or whatever, maybe an age which is desirable to women, I'm not sure, but like they age and then they stop aging, because he must have been 200 plus years old, and he looked 45.
I'm too old for this shit.
Now, the movie did kind of give a little bit of this away in the beginning, because in the opening scene, it's these shots of all these random women from all these random time frames who are clearly getting kidnapped or abused, and something terrible is happening to them, and they just keep showing shots of their reactions to things or people. And, you know, it was clear that whatever was happening to these women was going to happen to the main star in this movie. And then, obviously, it's been happening over a 200-year time frame. You've seen people from, like, the 1950s and even further back that had experienced this, you know, people of all different cultures as well, women. And I guess they all were kept, and they all got given or sacrificed off to this head witch beast. And based on the way it ends, so like this is now it started becoming a little bit of a body horror. So it was very mystical and mysterious up, and they started giving me like The Substance and the movie Together also, that type of vibe, because these creatures, or the one creature was like, it seemed like all the women that were kidnapped were kind of absorbed into one body, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of Ellie Sue from The Substance, just because it was so disturbing with all the eyes and the mouths, and like they're all smushed together. Also, the same thing was present in the movie Together, and I remember saying Together was kind of like a little mini Substance movie. But like, it was gross. And then even the solo demons, which they were really gross to look at too. They were like all grayish and pale, grayish white, and they're like completely hairless, and there's no eyebrows, and they were just gross. Their mouths were always opening, like dripping water or whatever you want to call it was dripping out of them. They were just kind of gross to what come, and they all kind of convulge in on Liz at the end, and it's like, oh, what's going on? Like, it's very metaphoric and symbolic at this point, where like you just see them all get really close to her, and she had like this. All of a sudden, she turns into the character that she was in The Monkey, like the mom in The Monkey. Like, she started to look like her, but even that kind of crazy laugh that she had in The Monkey, she starts having this crazy laugh, and then after they've kind of convulsed on her, it seems as though maybe they liked her, and it's not very clear. But so this is where it gets really crazy at the end. So like all of a sudden you see Malcolm, he's hanging upside down, and he actually looks his actual age, which is over 200. I mean, he looks extremely old. His hair is all thin and frail. His face is all pale. Even his tongue is out. It's all white. You know, he just looks really messed up and old. And he's hanging upside down. And then here comes Liz, Tatiana Maslavi. She's like, literally looks like the way she did in The Monkey, where her eyes turn black. And she basically has him hung upside down and dips him in this like giant little head-sized vat of honey, where his head gets dunked in this honey, and obviously he's gonna suffocate from that. And that's it, the end. Like, so like, you really have to put your brain to work to figure out really all the details of how did this really happen. Like, what gave the witch the power? Why was she really doing this? Why were the guys dating girls and being so complicated with bringing them and keeping them? You know, what was the end game here? And then, you know, it just, I guess it's up to you as the audience member to kind of interpret the ending. And I just, like I said, I'm not trying to do homework on a movie afterwards. Like, I just want to know what happened and figure out, you know, is it a happy ending? Is it a scary ending? You know, I know some horror movies, they can really mess up. Horror movies are not known for having great endings. I just feel like sometimes it just takes the right way to have. Even some of the best movies, like when I think of Elm Street, even Scream, the endings aren't always the best. What overall was the true meaning of what the story was saying? Was it talking about relationships? I felt like there was some sort of message about relationships. You know, I started to get even a little Speak No Evil vibe of like, because she was being so polite because she wanted to appease her new boyfriend. You know, or was it more about relationships, or, you know, how do you gauge in relationships? But like, they really never get that much into it. It's very ambiguous. And then, you know, even with the demons and what happened with the curse, it was very vague there. So at the end of the day, we're just going to get down to business on this one, because I had to think too much afterwards. And even to get this review put together and up, I had to really go over my thoughts, because I saw this movie yesterday and I had to wait till the next day to think about this. At the end of the day, like I said, it reminded me of Together. This movie is going to get a turkey burger. And, you know, the turkey burger gives me a very specific feeling. And I feel like there's a difference between what I think of turkey burger and when I think of veggie burger. When I think of a veggie burger, I can admit that the movie's competently made. It just wasn't my taste, the entire thing. When I think of a turkey burger, I think it's very competently made. It's a great movie. It's put together, acting well, cinematography as well. All that's done well, directed well. And I liked a lot of it. But something in the movie is just rubbing me the wrong way. And it's just spoiling it. And it's usually the ending or just something in it. Like, you know, I didn't like the ending of Together. And it's the same with this. This ending was so vague and bizarre. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. At the end of the day, I had to think too much to even get it. So I'm giving this one a turkey burger. What I will say is you kind of have to know yourself and what type of movie goer you are. If you like popcorn movies, you know, Halloweens and Screams and Weapons even, you know, I think Weapons was really an example of how you can be mysterious and symbolic and create a lot of intrigue and horror, but you still satisfy big audiences. This just, you got to know your director on this one. Ozgood Perkins, he's kind of got his own style. And if you haven't been into the movies that he's released, then you're probably not going to like this. Now, if you really did like Longlegs, Monkey, and, you know, Black Coat's Daughter, you'll probably like this, and you probably won't be disappointed. You know, it does compare a little bit to like Hereditary. You know, your brain has to work in it. So we'll leave it at that. Don't forget to stay scared of those guys who are 200 years old, kidnap you and keep you away from the mysterious demons and witches hiding on their cabins.
Only a mask that she's wearing. Always there, looking back at me. I think she's a keeper.